How y'all doing? Can you hear me? I love that the kids are just so front and center and empowered in this audience. It's fantastic. Um, yeah, so it is really good to be home, be here. It's a very intimate audience here. So everyone, welcome. Thank you for coming out in the March drizzle and wetness and slipperiness. I appreciate that. I appreciate that this is such a bookish town that people feel like it's worth it. And I appreciate my children getting dragged here like every other book event with their mother. I appreciate my parents, especially my mom, getting all these cookies, which makes everybody happy. And I appreciate the library. I have a love affair with libraries. My first job was shelving books at the Ann Arbor District Library. Dagny is my friend. Not, I was going to say one of my oldest friends, but I feel like that's not, because we are getting older. But one of my friends from Kami, yeah, we used to go to that library, right? Yeah, and one of the library staff saw me there enough and saw me do my homework and was like, you seem to really like the library. Would you like to be here more shelving books? And of course, I didn't have to think about it. I just said yes. So thank you for having me. And with that, I guess I will dive in. So this is my book, my new book, The Girl I Am, Was, and Never Will Be. And then the subtitle is A Speculative Memoir of Transracial Adoption. And yeah, it is a memoir. Can everybody hear me, by the way? Okay. Okay. Okay, I think we're going to be hearing from the peanut gallery a few times this evening. So it is a memoir, but it's a very strange memoir because there are two primary timelines. The first timeline is Shannon Gibney, myself, growing up here in Ann Arbor in 1985 with my white adoptive family. And then the second timeline is Erin Powers, the name that I was given at birth by my white birth mother, growing up in 1985 in Utica, New York. And there is a woods behind our house, which Dick and Sue Chase there, my dear friend Bobby, who is in New York State, who I grew up with, used to come over and play with me and my brothers too in this woods. It was very magical to us, as woods are to children. But there's a wormhole in this particular woods in this book. And the wormhole connects Erin and Shannon together. And so they can see parts of each other occasionally through this wormhole. Let's see other parts. So it's really a collage text. I also have photographs of various family members and lots and lots of letters, actually, from my birth mom, Patricia Powers, that my mom, Sue Chase. Sorry, you're sitting right next to her, so it says, it's double Sue. Yes. Yeah, Sue Gibney saved. My birth mother and my mom had a long correspondence, actually, which is not that common. And my mom saved all those letters. So when I was putting together this book, and I asked my mom for, all the documentation surrounding my adoption, search and reunion, everything that she had, and she just sent them to me. So there's a lot of those letters also in the book. And then kind of the last part, sort of approach of the book, are these micro essays. And so they're essays on the absurdities of the adoptee experience. So with that, I will begin the reading. This is the prologue. I was born January 30th, 1975, in Ann Arbor, Michigan. The name on my birth certificate is Shannon Gibney, and my parents are listed as Jim and Susan Gibney. These are my white adoptive parents who raised me. They gave me the loafers I remember wearing almost 40 years ago. The backyard woods where my imagination first grew roots was theirs. The woman who gave birth to me and subsequently relinquished me was named Patricia Powers. She was a white, working-class, Irish-American woman who had a short relationship with my African-American birth father, Boise Collins Jr. My birth mother named me Erin Powers after I was born, but I didn't find that out until I was 19. I possess no childhood memories of either of them. I grew up with my white adoptive parents in Ann Arbor, Michigan, with 2 white brothers who were biologically related to my parents. When I was 19 and no longer a child in the eyes of the state, I embarked on a search for my possible birth siblings and my birth parents. I found my birth mother, Patricia Powers, who then still lived in her hometown in Utica, New York. We had a complicated on-again, off-again relationship from the mid-90s until her death from cancer in 2014. She was 58 when she passed. Through my search, I also discovered that my birth father, Boise Collins Jr., died from complications due to injuries he sustained during a high-speed police chase in Palo Alto, California in 1981, when I was 6. He was 35 at the time of his death. I discovered many other things through my search and reunion experiences. I did not discover many things as well. I keep that particular hunger at bay with scraps of speculation. I now have 2 living children of my own, Boise and Marwen, and 1 dead, CNA. This is one way to tell the story in this time, in this place. What follows are other ways to tell the stories of Shannon and Erin, the known and the unknown, truth and speculation, to awaken the sleepers, to call forth the living, the dead, and those residing elsewhere. So that was the prologue, and I'm going to skip ahead to one of the micro essays. The literature of adoption is a fictional genre in itself. Adoptees know it to be generally as fantastical as any space opera, and just as entertaining to the masses. Every story must begin with the vulnerable but good-hearted poor birth mother who loves her baby very much but cannot take care of it. The birth father is always conspicuously absent in these narratives. There is a kindly, upper middle class, usually white couple who desperately wants a child and have pursued all avenues in order to get one. I see some people flipping through trying to find where I am. It's 53. If the couple is adopting internationally, they are in a rich country in the global north and have spent years on various lists waiting for an available child, many times spending thousands of dollars. They fight despite all odds to build their family through adoption. In the process, creating a healthy, happy, thriving child who eventually grows into a healthy, happy, thriving adult who has bonded perfectly with their new colorblind family. All this miraculous transformation from a poor, brown, cast-off orphan. Love conquers all. Once the birth mother has given up the child, she is no longer part of the story. Once the child is adopted, there is no talk of loss of first family, culture, language, or community. The adoption is simply a bureaucratic event that happened and then is over. Since the birth father was not part of the story from the beginning, he is not part of the adoptee story as it progresses. And if you ask about any of the particularities of this literature of adoption, who is adopting whom, from where to where, what are the racial dynamics of the transaction, the role that money plays, corruption, the trauma of removal, the burden of assimilation, you are branded an angry and maladjusted adoptee. When most of the literature written about a marginalized group of people comes from white adoptive parents who are psychologists, sociologists, creative writers, and professors who don't identify themselves as adoptive parents in their quote unquote objective work, what other possible outcome could there be? This is how I came to understand epistemological violence in my body. And now I'm going to read a section from the middle of the book. It's page 98. And this is a Shannon section. So Shannon is 10 years old, and she's playing in that woods that I mentioned behind the house, and she's playing with her younger brother, Ben. I think that's all you need to know. You can still hear me, right? Okay. All right. This is like a little bit further away than I'm used to. The girl grabs a long and brittle branch lying on the forest floor. It is almost the right size for the wall of the fort she's building. Almost. When she places it with the rest of the branches she has stacked up against a black gum tree, it falls. She harumphs and picks it up again, attempting to put it in exactly the same place. It falls again. Arg! Her little brother, digging a hole beside her, stops momentarily to ask what's wrong. This makes her madder for some reason. It won't stay up, she says. This time, however, she tries to lodge the bottom of the branch into the soil, thinking that it just might need a solid base to remain upright. But the skinny wood just collapses, and the girl kicks at the dirt in frustration. Shan, Ben yells at me, you're messing it all up. At John's instruction, we kids are creating a kingdom for a new species of giant ants. Our older brother is very smart and insists that he has discovered some back here in our enchanted forest. John has told us that these new fantastic giant ants will need small stick homes to live in, with small ant heads inside to lay on, and even an ant bathroom outside of each dwelling, which Ben is in charge of. Some people are laughing because they know John and Ben. Yes, yeah, they know that, yeah, this is fiction, but not really. Whatever, the girl mumbles. It's already all messed up anyway. Look. She grabs the errant branch and throws it toward the rest of the towering trees that create a kind of cave around them. When they are back here, it is like they are in a completely different place, a secret hideaway only visible to kids. The air even smells different here, musty and old and even wet sometimes. I often wonder if it is the air from another era, from olden times, that somehow got trapped underneath all the leaves and dirt and scrub, so that when we breathe, we are also transported to that other olden time. Lying on my stomach, I peer back at the house, breathing in the dirt and rousting around in the sticks and leaves and bugs and debris. The house looks almost like it is from the distant future, some imagined place that doesn't even exist yet. The sliding glass door and the shuttered windows of our modest home look strange to my suddenly feral eyes, and only become familiar to me again once I am back on our safe green lawn. It's not messed up, Ben insists. You just have to know how to do it. He stands up, not bothering to dust off the dirt that now covers him head to toe, and gently places the stick beside the others on the emerging fort wall. It stays up. The girl sighs and shakes her head. Then she throws her arm around her little brother. How do you always do that? He grins his 9-year-old grin. Magic. They both laugh. When something doesn't work, Ben is the person to ask, mostly because he has reserves of patience, while the girl seems to have been born without any. The girl begins thrashing around in the scrub beside them. We need more branches, she says. Her brother grunts his agreement beside her, already back at work, thrusting a stick into a rapidly growing hole. And it is then that she sees it, a small circle with a spiral center, moving on the forest floor. It is bright, sending out mostly white light, but occasionally you can see specks of violet and blue and even green flying out of it. Ben, she yells. I'll fix it in a minute, he says absently, never taking his eyes off of his stick and the ground. I jump back from the whirling funnel about a foot in front of me, and then hit Ben lightly on his head. No, look. He waves me off absently, but finally looks up. Shock spreads across his face and he jumps. What is that? The spiral seems to be growing with each motion, with each rotation, throwing off more light and even emitting a small sound as it turns. It's a high-pitched noise that is barely perceptible. I don't know, but it's cool, right? I say, inching my foot closer. For some reason, I am not scared at all. For some reason, I feel like I should get even closer to investigate. Ben grabs my arm. But it could be like a portal to another world or something, I say. We need to check it out. It appears to be a whirlpool, about a foot in diameter, circling and circling its light faster and faster, like something out of Star Trek, or even a dream. Maybe a rip in the fabric of space-time. Ben shakes his head, still staring at the thing. It's like he can't move, he's so shocked. So the girl decides to lean down instead. As she does, the noise gets both higher and louder, and she has to plug her ears. It is a metallic scream, an electronic pin plucking her eardrum. But from this angle, she can see that the expanding spiral has depth, that although it is located on the forest floor, it looks like it leads to someplace else. She brings her face closer to it, and her brother's grip on her arm gets stronger. She squints. I can see something, she says. I mean, someone. I see someone in there. There is a blurry head and a pair of ears and two eyes. It's like they are shimmering in front of me, about to surface out of water. She looks back at Ben, and he is shaking his head. I look into the spiral deeply, and I see myself peering back at me. I mean, not myself precisely, but someone who looks exactly like me. It's like she's me, and she isn't. She's got a scar above her left eye, and I don't. And she's wearing clothes I would never wear, a bright red short-sleeved jumper. But other than that, she looks just like me. And she seems like she's peering into a mirror or something. Who's there? She's asking. Who is that? She brings her face closer, and I reach my hand toward her, toward the center of the pulsating spiral. No, Ben yells and pulls at me, but it is too late. I touch the spiral, and a giant spark goes off. It feels like an electrical current goes through my body, and the spiral starts sputtering and spinning. It turns on its side, and the escalating high-pitched noise is all-encompassing for a minute, making me feel like my head might explode. Then there is a small popping noise, and it is gone. I blink. I reach out to where the spiral was only a moment before, but now it is only dirt. A stray leaf from a birch above languidly rides the air down and lands where the spiral was. I punch at the ground. What? But the ground is silent. It yields nothing. I turn to Ben, desperation in my eyes. Where did it go? He shakes his head. I can tell he's glad it's gone. Come back, I yell into the ground. Come back. But nothing happens. Did you see her? I asked Ben. She had my eyes, bright and questioning. So I'll end that section there. And then I'm going to go to another micro essay, which I think is appropriate after reading that section. It's on page 26. The tools of mainstream literary fiction are inadequate for investigating my questions. You can get to the edges of them, but not inside them. For that, you need a wormhole and multiple timelines. Perhaps a doppelganger. For me, these are not manufactured literary devices. They are not lies. And yet they absolutely are manufactured literary devices. And yes, they are lies. But only insofar as our manufactured birth certificates are lies. And the stories we were told as children by our loving parents about being given up because we were special are lies. Which is the lie? That my white birth mother knew my black birth father just a little and projected racist fears of predatory black men onto him when she learned I was searching for him before I found out he had died many years before, or that she was trying to protect me. Which is true. that I would have been loved but not cared for as well by my birth mother as by my solidly middle-class adoptive family. That my birth mother was not in a position to be a quote unquote good mother to me. So she quote unquote did the right thing by giving me up. Or that there is no right thing when it comes to cleaving the tie between mother and child. What has become of the other me living out that first timeline with my birth mother? How are you, Erin Powers? Who was that girl and who is she now? I've never seen her, and yet I see her every day. Walking my dog, she passes me, her hair a little longer, a little frizzier, her eyes downcast. Leaving the grocery store, I see her smoking languidly on the steps. Her Doc Martens scarred with red paint and glittery silver laces. She is funny but reticent. She watches but does not reveal. She holds her stories tightly. And like me, she knows that the truth is a slippery thing, that it can float in and out of what we accept as real in an instant. She could step through a wormhole at any minute, and she could be me running a cross-country race at the high school, leaning into my Blackness in my 20s, and furiously trying to translate everything into words in my 30s. We could bump into each other on the way to meet our birth father, who neither of us actually met. All of it, all of the possible us's exist without explanation, answer, or resolution, just like our stories. I am starving to know more. What time am I at? Okay. Yeah. One more, you think? Says the Peanut Gallery. Oh, one more. Okay. All right. So I'll read just a few pages of the reunion scene. So this is on page 127. It's in the Shannon Gibney section. And this is when I'm 19 and I have gone to Utica, New York with my friend Bobby. And in real life, my friend Dagny also went with us. Yes, she did. She didn't go all the way to Patricia's house, but she came a lot of the way. And I always say when I'm talking about this book is also about the power of female friendship too, which is something that I think our culture certainly doesn't recognize or value enough, particularly in terms of holding people down, when you're going through a rough time. I have a friend who said, and we're all in our late 40s now. So, there's divorces and, like different sets of kids and all kinds of things. And, she was like, men come and go. If you're heterosexual, men come and go. But she said, but your girlfriends, those are the people that will keep you alive, and that's certainly been the truth of my life. So yeah, so we're meeting Patricia for the very first time, my birth mother. No, turn left, I tell Bobby, frantically peering at the mashed up map in my hands. I think Clinton is off of Newberry. Bobby turns the steering wheel of the 89 Toyota Corolla that my parents have let us drive from Ann Arbor all the way out to Utica. I love that car. A 7.5-hour journey across the US and Canada that will ultimately end at my birth mother, Patricia Powers' house. Okay, yeah, I say, pointing ahead. I can see the sign right up there. Bobby swats away my arm, blocking her view of the road. She grumbles something under her breath, and I grin. We have been best friends for 13 years now, and although we often laugh as sisters, we can bicker like them too. I see it, she says irritably. She downshifts into second gear, and we rumble up the quiet suburban street. The houses are maybe 60 or 70 years old, sturdy single-family dwellings with small, snow-filled lawns. I have been to New York City to drop my older brother John off at Columbia, but I have never ventured to this part of the state before. I can't quite pinpoint how it feels different from the Midwest, but it definitely does. There's a kind of hum underneath everything, an electricity that animates this small working-class town that I don't feel back in Ann Arbor. Bobby is a sophomore at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute in Troy, New York, where she is studying environmental science. When I told her I had found out that my birth mom lived in Utica, the first thing she said was, "Oh my God, that's like an hour and a half from Troy. We have to visit." Then she caught herself in her breath. "I mean, if you want to, if you decide you want to, I'll go with you." I told her I would think about it. Patricia's house is modest, a 2-story bungalow with a small porch in front. Yellow trim lines the quaint brick exterior. "Cute," I say as Bobby pulls the car up the slightly inclined driveway. She nods in agreement. We have been in the car for more than 2 hours since our last pit stop, and I know that Bobby's long legs are killing her. She practically leaps out of the driver's seat and stretches for a moment on the driveway. I am more taciturn, realizing all at once that we are here. We are here, which means that in just a moment, I will gather myself, walk down the concrete pathway to the front door, and knock. And the woman on the other side will be the one who gave birth to me and relinquished me shortly thereafter. The woman I have been conversing with weekly on the phone these past 2 months, as well as trading letters with. When Bobby and I had determined that we would in fact make the trip, I realized that we would need money for gas and other incidentals like food. My work-study job at the college would not cover these expenses, so I reluctantly acknowledged that I would need to ask Patricia to cover them if I was going to go. When I did, she did not react well, saying that she would have to think about it, and hung up on me shortly thereafter. Later, she called me back to apologize, saying that she had been taken advantage of many times in her life and was overcautious because of it. But after talking about it with her partner, Josephine, she saw that it was a reasonable request and one that she could grant. I lean my head against the cool car window, its icy edges calming my increasingly hot skin. I think about my parents back home in Ann Arbor, who were incredibly hurt when I told them about the search, and my brothers, who don't understand why I need to do it at all. If I'm honest, I'm not sure I do either. And yet, they have loaned me their car and have somehow found a way to listen to my stories of non-identifying information, central registries, and now reunion. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody. All right, let's see if we have any questions. Right.
I wonder if you could read more of the section about how you developed a relationship with your father through this process, your birth father through this process. Is there a section in there that you think you could find?
I mean, yeah, I think probably just talking about it. So I didn't have very much information at all. Is this on? Okay, all right. I didn't have very much information at all about my birth father, who was also like the Black side of my family. And so every adoptee is given by the agency that handles the adoption non-identifying information, and that means it's called non-identifying information because that's in reference to the birth parents. And so I had a sheet of paper that had all this information on Patricia's side of the family, but almost nothing about my birth father. So yeah, when I was 19 and searching, started seeing a therapist that specialized in adoption, and she actually found my birth father's death certificate, and that's how I found out that he had died from the complications resulting from the high-speed police chase when I was 6. Yeah, and so that was very hard to process for a number of reasons. And then, yeah, so then later on, Bobby and I tracked down my paternal grandfather, who at that time still was alive and lived in Detroit when I was 19. And I wasn't able to meet him before he died. He died about 3 years after that. But I was able to talk to him on the phone. And there's a phone conversation that I had with him in the book. And after that, I also got my birth father's sister, so my aunt on that side. I also was able to meet her in my mid-20s as well. And then the kids and I met her about 4 years ago as well. So it's been a long journey. It's been layered for sure. And then I do feel like through writing this book, I was able to kind of construct a relationship with my birth father that I never really had in real life. Yeah, both Shannon and Erin meet him in the book, which I obviously never got to do in real life. Maui has a question.
Yeah. Is there the worm? Is there a world in the wormhole?
What kind of world is in the wormhole? Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, there are many worlds inside the wormhole, and the wormhole also has like these other parts that jut out of it. There's a part of the wormhole that doesn't go anywhere where I'm grandma and grandpa's parents. Yeah, and they're my kids. Yeah, and you and Boise are my parents, and I'm your kid. Yeah, the wormhole is weird. It's really weird. Yeah. Yes, it's pretty funny. Yeah, it's really weird. And there's also so we see just a little bit of things in the wormhole, but it's not stable. Yeah, it's just like you can't stay in there for like Erin goes in there and she meets Boise Collins, the birth father, but she can only stay in there for a few moments because whatever, in space time, like whatever, she's not in there very long before he's like, you have to get out of here because it's going to collapse. Yeah. It's in my imagination. It is. Yeah. It's not real. As far as I know. I mean, right. Based on the information that I have. Yeah. Yeah. It's just in my Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what mommy does for a living, makes up stories. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, any more questions?
What was the most challenging part of the book to write, and what made that part so challenging?
It's so hard. I mean, because the book before this, Dream Country, was like just kicked my butt in so many different ways. And that book is, 5 generations of a Liberian American family. It's over 200 years. It's on 2 continents. There's 5 different protagonists. It's like, and I'm not Liberian. So it just was like a tremendous amount of research and, so it was almost like every part of that book was hard to write, which is why it's not surprising that this is my next book, which, just sort of poured out of me because I'm an expert in my own experience. So it's hard for me to kind of think about this book in that way, like the parts that were hard, because honestly, compared to like Dream Country, it just was like it wasn't hard. It was really fun to write in a lot of ways. I think also because I got to embrace and access also the nerdy parts of me too, in like really kind of fun ways. People have said since the book's been out to, I always say it's interesting. You work on something for a long time and it's just yours. And then it goes out into the world, and it's a really beautiful process because other people encounter it through their lived experiences and their perspectives, and then they give it back to you differently. And so since the book's been out for about 2 months now, it's been so interesting because people are like, the topics are really heavy, it's really about, intergenerational loss, trauma. How do you, in a culture that values this kind of, we can say it's an illusion, but still values this idea of this seamless narrative, right, of family. What do you do when you don't have that, right? Like, what are your choices for trying to create a story? And so that part is heavy, but then people have been saying that like it's actually counterbalanced the lightness, like from the scene, right, like in the woods with my brother, right, where it's like there's all this kid stuff going on there, right, and then Robotech, and I know, and like the wormhole and all of that's lighter. So I think honestly, it was really hard for me emotionally to go back and read a lot of those letters from Patricia. And I've had people who didn't know me when I was going through this, but people who are very, close friends, have the experience of reading it and tell me, I just wanted to give you a hug. I just wanted to protect you. So I did have like, I'm a Buddhist, and my teacher's always saying like things can be done, but they can still have momentum, So it definitely was this experience of like reading some of those letters, like, God, I can't believe she said that to me. I can't believe she did that to me. And you're just watching it sort of like bloom in your mind, and just like, wow, okay, that's still there. That's not resolved for me. I don't have to do anything about that. I can put it in my book, but like yeah. So that those kinds of things, I think. And then at the same time, trying to balance that with, women who relinquish their children are some of the most vilified people, in our culture, but I would argue in like all cultures. And so not wanting to participate in that, in this, at the same time that it's like, well, no, but I still have to tell my truth. And so that's always difficult. I always go back to this quote by the wonderful poet, and I'm butchering his name, Czesław Mislowitz. He's Polish poet, and he has this quote: "Whenever a writer is born into a family, that family dies." And I love that quote because I think it's totally true, and really what the quote gets to is that any writer or artist worth their salt, our first allegiance is to the truth. Whatever that is, right? It's going to be messy. It's going to be multifaceted. It's going to depend on, your point of view. But still, I know in my writing when I'm skirting the truth, right? Of my own experience, my own perceptions or whatever. Family is an institution. And all institutions, their first priority is to perpetuate themselves at any cost. And many times at the cost of the truth. So, yeah. So, I definitely felt that tension there, particularly writing about people who didn't ask to be written about, Patricia didn't ask to be written about. And I think if she were still alive, I couldn't have written this. No way. Or maybe I could have written it, but not published it. Yeah. Why? Mom! Woo! That That's the best quote ever. I'm totally writing that down. I will never forget that. I will say, however, that it is, many people have said, Mom, that it's a very, I mean, it's a multifaceted portrayal of you and Dad, but people have said to me, shh, children, people have said to me, nobody is a villain in this. Everybody is doing the best that they can, you know, and that it's a very I don't want to say balance because I hate that word, but you know, it portrays you and Dad in a good light. Yes, let's put it that way. Okay. Okay. Yes. So, I mean, so there is that, but you know, I mean, the Patricia sections, especially like the ones with Erin, which quote unquote didn't really happen, right? Like they don't portray her that well, you know? And then also because, as I detail in the book, I wrote an essay when I was 25 that was going to be published in this anthology of children with queer parents. And the whole thesis of the essay was that I thought, as a marginalized person in America, meaning a mixed Black woman, that Patricia, as a marginalized person in another way, which is she's a white lesbian, like we would be able to understand each other and have that connection around our marginalized identities, and that wasn't the case at all. You know, probably the scene in the book that that most people talk about, to me the most, as most impactful, and also frankly people who are mixed and are half white or transracially adopted and their white family, is the scene at the dinner table, right, where the racist microaggressions about Latinx folks come out, you know, and yeah. So I mean, I just think, but you know, so that really happened, and I detailed that in the essay, and Patricia didn't like it and was like, "It's all lies. If you publish this, I'll sue you." Like all this stuff. It was like this whole. It basically precipitated the end of our relationship. I mean, I pulled the essay, but she couldn't. It just, we couldn't recover after that, because for me it was like she abandoned me another time. So. That's also, like, that's not something, again, things can be over, you know, that's over, but it still has momentum in me. You know, that's not something that I can just be like, "Oh, well, okay. Now I'm going to publish this whole book," you know.
Okay. What was your favorite thing about writing the book?
Yeah, you got great questions. My favorite thing about writing the book, I think, was just like two things. One, getting to nerd out and just like not feeling like just letting that go, right? And then two, I think, not really knowing what I was doing a lot of the time, but giving myself the freedom to explore that. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Oh, there's a question right there.
Just a quick note. Is she your daughter? Okay, was she a prop? Okay.
What's your next project?
Right. I mean, this is a busy year for me, and writers like to be busy, right? I mean, it's much better to be busy than to be like, "Where are my books?" Right? Which I have been there. So I'm thankful, but I have to say 4 books in 1 year is too much. So, and which is what I have. Yeah, because this book actually was supposed to come out last year, but because of the pandemic and, you know, supply chain issues, whatever, got pushed back. Again, I'm not complaining. This is not me complaining. really. And then, so I have a book called Sam and the Incredible African and American Food Fight, which is a picture book, basically based on my son, Boise. Yes, who is half Liberian American and half African American, and so like every night there's all this tension in the house about what kind of food they're going to have. African food or Liberian African food or American food, and it's totally stressing him out until his stomach starts talking to him like this, and then they come up with like a plan. So it took about like how many years, Boise? 7 years for the book to come out. Boise calls it his book, so he's a little bitter that it took that long, but here we are. Then I have in October. Very excited about this. We believe it's the first anthology of YA short stories by adoptees for adoptees, and that's co-edited by Nicole Chung, and Harper Tina is bringing that out, and that's called When We Become Ours. So that's awesome, and then I'm working on a like really weird. I like weird stuff, as you can probably tell. I also get bored easy, so I don't like to do stuff that I already know I can do. So it's a middle grade series. I've never written middle grade before, and it's kind of based on my son's friend group. But it's this group of like multiracial, multicultural tweens who are trapped in this oil refinery. It's called Children of Oil City. And they're all alone except for this like weird, creepy hologram dude. And it's got magic and portals, and so that's what I'll be doing this summer.
Did you ever like hit like a, I guess some people call it writer's block? Like you had information, but you didn't know how to put it into words. And like, if so, what part was the hardest for you to like put out there?
These kids are smart. Very, very smart. I am really an annoying writer, like with this, because I don't get writer's block. My problem is, particularly as I've aged, I have too many things that I want to write about and not enough time, right? So I really have to just be like, okay, I'm going to do this now. All this other stuff is going to go to the side, and I'm just going to do X, Y, Z. Yeah. And I feel like that's also part of the confidence that comes with being 48 and having written pretty much since I could read, is sort of like in my 20s when I would reach a point where I would, in a project where I'd be like, I don't know what to do. Whatever. Like now I can pretty much figure it out. Like, okay, I need to put this away for a little while and then come back to it. Okay, you know what? Let me actually try to write the scene from a different character's point of view, or yeah, I think I need to really understand the environment and atmosphere that this is happening in more. I don't think I have a solid grounding in that, which is why the emotional life of the characters isn't coming up as much or something like that. So yeah, but that's a great question. Thank you.
Any more questions? Well, Claire.
When you have a lot of ideas, how do you choose which one to work on?
My son just said under his breath, us kids. My children do inspire a lot of my work, which is why I have so many more things I want to write about, now than I did, I think, when I was younger. But I would say two things. The creative process is so mysterious, and I kind of love it because of that. But usually what happens when I'm finishing like a big narrative project, like a novel, the next project will start kind of invading my subconscious, like my dreams. Like for this one, I was finishing Dream Country, and I started really having dreams and like thinking about this girl, Erin Powers, like, but who would she have been though? Like what would her experience have been? And then it just started, it wasn't bothering me, but I just got like really kind of in this weird part of my brain obsessive about it. Like, okay, I want to find out who she is, and the only way I can really do that is by writing this, you know? So that happens a lot. And then also as I've gotten older, the other thing that's happened and sort of more established is like we're very lucky in the Twin Cities. We have a very vibrant literary arts community. People have worked really hard to make it that way too. And so, you know, as I've gotten more established and people sort of know me, they'll ask me to collaborate on things. So I have a co-authored children's picture book, Where We Come From, that came out in October. And I was asked to do that. And so that will also determine, you know, what I work on next, is if, you know, somebody asked me, and deadlines are your friend, you know. It's funny. People are, you know, scared of deadlines, but deadline can get you to get your stuff done. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? Anybody else?
So talk about nerding out and how nerding out and how that helped, because for some people, like, that can be a source of creative outsiderness, but for others it can be a source of isolation. So how was that for you?
Well, you know, Dags, you and I have had multiple conversations about this issue of nerddom for many years, and I do think that being a nerd has become more mainstream since when we were, you know, kids in the 80s and 90s. Yeah. So, but I think for me, you know, just the spirit of possibility, right, that I felt when I was watching Robotech, you know, with my brothers, right, all those times, and this idea that there's so much we don't know necessarily, right, like through those narratives of wormholes and whatever, like that just creates a sense of lightness, I think, for me, and also it's just not something I've done before, right? So that sort of was really fun. And just to go into that sort of like childlike place again, sensibility of the world. And I think for me, it's interesting being a nerd most of my life. Well, I mean, my whole life, but like for most of my life, being a nerd hasn't really been an outsider identity. Like the bigger outsider identity was like being Black, for example, right? Like in all these white spaces and places. And so being a nerd actually like got me community, got me like belonging in some interesting ways. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else?
I could go on for so long with these. Is there like, this is very classic question. Is there like anything that you struggled with that people that might have similar experiences to you, like you want to give them advice? Just anything to put out there.
I mean, I think just I hope when people read the book want to some things are universal and never change. I think I hope when people read the book, one of the big things that they get from it is like, you know, we're all experts in our own experience. Like, no, but whatever that is, and however weird that is, and however like misunderstood it is, you know, there's a group text at the end of the book, which is in the afterword, which people tell me like it's just like they're like it blows their mind, right? And it's basically like between me and two other friends who are transracially adopted Korean Americans, and And it's basically like it's showing the level of intimacy that you can get to very quickly when you have these points of connection and even kinship with specific people. I say, in this case, people who have, who are products of similar narrative wholes, let's say, right? Because a lot of these friends, they just, I'm having this short conversation with my friend about how like both our moms said that they were going to abort us, right? Like right before, and then they were like, her mom was like, and now it's time to go to Costco. And I'm like, yep, that's how it goes, right? And so there's many people who would hear a conversation like that and just be like alienated and like whatever. But for us, it's like actually bringing us together, So what's that? I don't think it's trauma bond. I think it's more like, because trauma bonding is more like the trauma is running you, as I understand it. But I just think in terms of like, this is not something that makes me a freak. This is something that happens under these circumstances to these people, including me. And so I don't have to carry it like it's something weird anymore. Yeah.
Okay, we have time for one last question, if anybody has one. All right, Claire.
What inspired you to tell this story in this genre that's kind of sci-fi and speculative?
Yeah, I mean, I think because adoptees' lives are so filled with fiction, and there's always this question of like, well, what is the truth? And does the state get to decide what my real name is? Like, in that micro essay, like, I don't think I read that one, but it's like, so you're my brother because the state said that you're my brother, but then I can just say that Dagny's my sister then. I don't need the state to say, right? So it's just like, and again, since the book's been out, definitely the most moving part of it has been hearing from other adoptees who are like, I mean, it's like brings me to tears sometimes, who are just like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one living in multiple timelines. And now I realize that's not the case at all. And then I have two friends who are therapists, and they're like, this is actually a valid therapeutic model, like for processing trauma, which is also really interesting, So I just feel like, right, the question of sort of like what is real, what is not, right, like implicitly gets activated through this form. But I mean, I knew that I was writing like the weirdest thing that I've ever written, and it was really could be published because working with my editor, who this is our third book together, and there's like a lot of trust. And I told him about the project, and his response was to get excited. And like not every editor would have had that response. I always say that when people are, is it memoir? Is it fiction? Like, what is it? And I always say like, the book doesn't fit because I don't fit. So I'm not going to try and make it fit. I don't know what it is, but I don't have to because it exists in the world. Yeah. Okay. Can we give Rowan the last word?
How long did it take to make?
This was actually one of the fastest books I've ever written, particularly because Dream Country before this, on and off, took me 20 years. Yeah. I always say I spent 10 years trying not to write Dream Country, and then I spent 10 years writing it. And so this one was like maybe 2.5 years total, which is quick. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. We do have book signing. If anybody would like to have their book signed by the author, we're just going to ask Shannon to sit over here. You can get in line if you'd like. And thanks again. Thank you so much. We're honored to have you here tonight. Thank you.